What's up, and welcome to Nowstalgia Pod. We're giving you your weekly look what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan with my co-host Dave Martin Swagger. He didn't retire, folks. He's here. What's going on, man?
It's a really, really tough decision, Pat, to continue to do this podcast. And when everybody booed, it hurt. It hurt.
Yeah, so there was a report today that somebody might have slashed his tires. I don't think Indianapolis is taking Andrew Luck's retirement very well.
Yeah, middle America sports, man. They don't get superstars through free agency. So when you get drafted there, they want you to stay.
Yeah, they want you to stay. Andrew Luck was out, but we're still here with you, as Dave said. So if you're listening, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to follow the podcast in any other way you want to listen to it. And also give us that five-star rating and review on iTunes.
Yeah.
Before we jump into some news, some music reviews, and a season of television in review as well today, we want to start off talking about some concerts we went to in New York City. I didn't know you were going to be in Brooklyn this weekend, and I was a little pissed you didn't hit me up, actually.
Just Thursday. Yeah, I saw a Beast Coast show Thursday night at Pier 17, which is actually a really awesome venue, outdoor rooftop on the East River waterfront, and great experience until it rains. I'll get to the rain. But yeah, no, we had mentioned when we reviewed the Beast Coast album that I was interested in that tour, and they added the 2 New York City shows, starting with this Thursday night one, when their Gov Ball set got completely rained out. Like they were literally on the stage about to start their first song, and then like a siren goes off and clears out the festival. So they added this as a makeup show at the end of the tour, and it was sick. It really was sick. I mean, the mosh pit started at like 6:30 because it was an early start to the show. It was supposed to be 6 to 10. And I was really impressed with the crowd, one of the best crowds I've ever been in. Just tons of energy, tons of people that really knew the songs. And, I think Beast Coast as artists, they're not like mainstream rappers. So does anyone casually show up to one of these shows? Probably not, especially midweek. And you can probably, you gauge that looking at the clientele. It was probably like 80-20 guys, which I expected. But no, I was really impressed with the crowd and all the performers. To be honest, CJ Fly, Nick Caution, they were really great. Tons of energy. And then, as I expect from the guys I've seen before, Underachievers, Flatbush Zombies, and Joey and Pro Era, the rest of Pro Era, they're just like all consummate professionals commanding the stage. It's a lot of fun. And being that this was a hometown show for them, they were going to bring out some guests, and the first guest was actually A$AP Ferg, who came out and did Plain Jane, which was fucking awesome. Tons of energy. And then it got rained out because there was lightning, and we lost about an hour and 20 minutes, and there were supposed to be more guests, and we don't know who those guests were, but could have been Chance, could have been because he was in town, Action Bronson, French Montana, A$AP Rocky, who the hell knows? But even though it got cut short early, it was still a fantastic time, man. And Issa Gold of Underachievers the night before was at Tame Impala, where you went. That was at MSG, right?
Yeah, I went to go see Tame Impala at MSG. They played 2 nights. I wasn't down on the floor, which is my only regret about the show, because the light show that goes along with it is very intricate. So if you're on the floor, it almost feels like there's like lights and lasers above you pretty much the whole time. Kind of like you can't even see other parts of the performing center while it's happening. But Tame Impala, for a band that, similar to a band like LCD Sound System, where James Murphy arranges, plays all the instruments, and then records it and drops it on the album, Kevin Parker does the same thing. So I was a little bit interested to see if that translated, but they sounded almost identical to the album version, which I was really surprised at. And not only that, but when they did riff, especially Kevin Parker, who I wasn't aware he was as good of a guitarist as he was. When they did riff, it really added to the song and the show, especially because I think live Tame Impala's songs can start to feel a little bit samey. They have a very similar vibe. So I was like, this could maybe become a little boring, but it never lulled at all. And I went with a couple of people who weren't huge Tame Impala fans going into it, so I was interested to see how they responded. and pretty much everybody left wanting to go to the next night. So it was really great show. Tame Impala, obviously one of the best rock bands. We're still waiting for that summer drop. I don't think we're getting a summer drop from them at this point. Hopefully by the end of the year for a new album. But if you can catch them when they're in town, I really recommend it. And MSG is a great venue. We had not so great seats, but still saw everything. Acoustics were great, and the seats there are padded and cushioned. So that was also nice. While we waited.
Good.
I did not see the opener, Kevin Negroni. Have you ever heard of this band?
Nope. No, I haven't.
It's Velvet Negroni, actually, but they sounded very what you'd expect with the Tame Impala opener. So I'll put it that way. But yeah, great show. Both had a good time at our NYC shows. What's the next show for you?
I bought ASAP Ferg tickets for his new Yeti tour. That's in December.
Was that like fifth time?
Literally the last place I saw ASAP Ferg play. The fourth time I've seen him headline, excluding other instances. Yeah, that's what I have on the docket right now. Yeah, nothing else. Do you have anything?
I have Vampire Weekend in 2 weeks, which I'm very excited for. Back at MSG. So
Sunflower in the Morning.
Very excited for that. Also, was excited to talk about Spider-Man today. You know, we just talked about Spider-Man Far From Home. Last year we talked about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And this past week, news dropped that Marvel and Sony were not able to come to an agreement for continuing to make these movies together. So Sony was pulling its rights from Marvel, which was pretty big news considering Spider-Man in the Marvel Universe had been set up to be a key figure for Marvel Phase 4 moving forward. Wanted to ask you, Dave, how are you feeling about this news?
Yeah, so definitely came as a bit of a surprise to most people, just given the timing of the drop on the eve of the D23 Expo. And well, I think it's certainly disappointing to any hardcore MCU fan. Certainly the Twitter trends of the day of the announcement speak to that. But I kind of have to applaud Sony for protecting their golden goose, you know, because we know that that's the most valuable film rights that Sony owns, right? And they'll never sell them. They'd be stupid to. So they're never going to give them back to Marvel Studios and Disney now. So therefore, they have to just kind of keep their prize. And I just kind of am surprised that Disney and you don't know where the decision making with this is. Feige obviously is the consulting producer. He's in his past relationship of now 5 Spider-Man MCU entries, but I don't know if Feige decided that he certainly probably didn't, that Marvel wanted at least a 25% profit split, you know, and there was talk that they offered 50-50, you know, Disney would finance 50%, then get 50% of the profits. It's pretty self-explanatory. But they already have the merchandising rights to Spider-Man, and having Spider-Man in their movies benefits the rest of their MCU movies, right? So they get plenty out of the Spider-Man brand, and they can, you know. So I just don't understand why they felt they needed to have a hard line with, well, if you don't give us more money, then we can't spare Kevin Feige. And there's some conflicting reports, and there's some finger pointing about who's to blame with the ultimatums, if there were any, you know. But I'm just kind of surprised that Disney just wouldn't just run it back what they had before, because we know Sony's going to make their Sony universe. Venom 2's on the way, and Morbius with Jared Leto comes out next summer. Sinister 6 could come up, who knows, right? So we know that's happening, so why wouldn't Disney just try and keep it going? So I don't know, I'm pretty surprised, but I wouldn't blame Sony for this, because they're just protecting their IP.
Yeah, if anything, this felt like Disney going for like a heat check in a sense, and just totally bricking it. You know, they've acquired so many properties within the last year or two, and it's like they almost were like, this is definitely going to work out for us in some way. And Sony's like, nah. Like, and I don't even know what a fair price would be. I mean, Far From Home grossed over $1 billion.
It's the highest grossing Sony movie ever.
So it's like, how do they even properly value something like that or get value back? And they can't, which is why they can't move it. And good for them on not. And they've also created a Spider-Man film in the past now that have received critical acclaim.
Right.
So it's not like Sony can't make a good Spider-Man movie, but I think everybody who's been invested in the Marvel universe is invested in this Tom Holland Peter Parker and wants to see him back. I honestly don't even believe that negotiations are dead, like people have said, that this is how it's going to end up. I think they'll end up figuring something out. But
I think an underrepresented part of this that I think a lot of MCU heads are ignoring is that from the Phase 4 announcements that we got at San Diego Comic-Con, we know that there's no plans for a Spider-Man film. And obviously, that's because the deal was up and nothing was dated for that reason. But 2020 and 2021 are all filled with MCU movies. And 2022, we just learned at D23 that one of those is, in fact, Black Panther 2, as we expected. We assume the other two are Captain Marvel 2 and Guardians 3. So that leaves 3 years without a spot for Marvel to slot in a Spider-Man film in their universe. And that just seems like too long of a wait for Sony, because this is Sony's big thing, right? And we know Homecoming and Far From Home, that was a 2-year gap, and Holland was popping up in the other stuff too. So it is, despite what we thought coming out of Far From Home and Endgame, that Peter Parker, he's the new face of the MCU, the new Stark, as it were. Mm-hmm. We never saw any concrete plans of that because the deal was up. And frankly, I'm actually kind of looking forward to what Sony could do with it, just because these two Spider-Man movies, especially Far From Home, have felt more like MCU films than Spider-Man films. And maybe we can kind of get back to the essence of Spider-Man in New York City, fighting these lower level villains. I'm not sure. But you're right, though. I doubt this is the last news we'll hear. I'm sure something will happen eventually. But in the meantime, definitely not the shakeup that Disney wanted. Just
no,
be obvious.
Definitely not. And Disney actually, like you mentioned already, had D23 going on this weekend. We're not going to talk much about it. I mean, we're going to be reviewing a lot of the things that come out on Disney Plus. I just wanted to see if how you were feeling about most of the Star Wars stuff specifically. We got some more clips for The Rise of Skywalker. We got the first look for The Mandalorian.
Oh yeah,
so some cool stuff in there. So what stood out to you?
Mandalorian looks fantastic.
Yeah.
We'd seen brief behind the scenes teasers and photos before, and looks fucking great. Cannot wait. It's a launch title for Disney Plus, and we learned an important tidbit that Disney Plus will be releasing episodes week to week, unlike Netflix, and that's very exciting because I don't want to have to binge The Mandalorian. I want to get into that grit, that cantina grime, and soak that shit up week to week. So that's exciting. And then The Rise of Skywalker, yeah, and we got that. It officially came out today, what they showed at the expo, and we didn't see a whole lot. Looks cool. I think obviously the Dark Ray stuff is some kind of misdirect, whether it's vision or projection, or some people are getting really headcanny and saying it's a clone from Palpatine or possession. Who the hell knows? But I think it's obviously not exactly what it seems. But
sure,
obviously, hype is at maximum. Just be obvious.
Yeah. Are you feeling more excited for Rise of Skywalker or Mandalorian at this point?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Yeah, I say Rise of Skywalker still, just because that they're really building it up as the culmination of 9 movies.
Yeah.
The Skywalker saga comes to an end, and I do believe that it's going to have a lot of closure and finality with that. We'll talk about this when we get closer to the movie, but that's just seems like they're really focusing on that, and I think that'll just have a lot of great payoff for fans. So yeah, definitely 9. But Mandalorian, man, remember when I was in fucking high school and there was the Star Wars live action news, and you knew that George Lucas had 100 scripts, but it was too expensive to make these shows, and I was like, oh, this will never happen. I get the fact that we actually got a high budget live action Star Wars show that looks great coming soon. It's just an exciting time.
Yeah, I'm more excited for Rise of Skywalker, just like you said, for that culmination, and also for the I kind of want to see how they move forward after the last one, because there was so much division. They seem to have kind of like wanted to steer back into more the JJ type movies, but I also with the Mandalorian, especially with Taika Waititi being named as one of the voice cast as playing G11, who I think that's the name of the droid, or is it G88?
IG-88, yes,
Yeah,
from
so
Empire.
IG88 is the he's not playing that character, the famous bounty hunter robot, but he's playing a droid called IG11 who gets confused for IG88 a lot. So I feel like it's going to be a lot of like very funny moments with that. And what a great addition.
Yep.
I mean, and also Bill Burr is in The Mandalorian. Had no idea about that.
Oh, he is? Oh, no,
Yeah, you don't really see much of him in the trailer except for like the back of his head, but I feel like that'll add a nice element to it. So Mandalorian could be like the first like truly funny, I feel like, Star Wars
Interesting.
movie or
Cool.
property. So
I mean, it's
some
about
cool
a rogue,
stuff.
so you hope there's some levity in between the murder, right?
Absolutely. Why don't we move on to Rhapsody though?
Yeah,
So
dog.
Rhapsody dropping her third studio album. Has had a lot more projects
Yep.
in that time. This album titled Eve, with the concept of every track is named after a female that she looks up to or idolizes in some sense. And I wasn't really aware of this album, but you said, why don't we check this one out? So I gave it a listen, and I'm really glad I did. I found this to be a really enjoyable album in a lot of senses, and also maybe my favorite J. Cole feature is on this. So there's a lot to talk about. At least favorite J. Cole feature of the year, and he's had some good ones.
Mhm.
How are you feeling about this Rhapsody?
Yeah, so I was definitely anticipating this just because Layla's Wisdom from 2017 was nominated for Best Rap Album, which was both a nice sign of the Grammys actually showing some growth and recognizing someone who's not that famous in Rhapsody, and also just getting it right because that album was really great. And people are, maybe you don't know her solo work, but she was featured on Pimp a Butterfly, on Complexion. So people know Rhapsody, and she's been in the game a long time. She's in her 30s. I think I first became aware of her just kind of offhand a long while ago because she had a Lucy track with Mac Miller. And I was like, oh, who's this? And then I realized there was a shit ton of music credited to Rhapsody. I was like, oh, wow, we got some work to do. And I actually ended up catching up to that in 2017. And then, yeah, this Eve, it really hits her first music of any kind since 2017. And yeah, I think the concept of all these famous Black women that she looks up to, I think really works just because Rhapsody has always been a really wholesome lyricist and kind of a deep thinker. And I think that definitely shines through on this album, Eve. And
Certainly.
what I like about this album too is I think there's you can take loose tracks from the list and they're all pretty accessible. I think, as we say all the time, there's lyrical conscious rappers that have a hard time separating individual songs from like the whole body of work, and you kind of get lost. And I don't think that's the case with this one. So yeah, I was definitely a big fan of this, and I think I mean it's been said a lot, but she's without question I think that the most lyrical female rapper going right now, and just one of the best rappers, period as it is.
Yeah, I could see this getting nominated for another Grammy for Best Rap Album. I think not only the concept, but the way that she delivered on this was really, really well done. And I liked so many of these tracks. Like I mentioned, Sojourner with J. Cole. Man, J. Cole, the way he sounds in this just sounds like he's bringing so much more intensity than he usually does to his tracks. And not that J. Cole needs that intensity, but it just brought a whole different side to him into this that I really thought came across really well. And she in Rhapsody keeps up with J. Cole throughout this. Or maybe it's the other way around, that J. Cole punches up to Rhapsody. I'm not so sure. What other songs did you like?
Yeah, so I think track one, Nina, stood out to me just because it samples Strange Fruit from Nina Simone. And then the second song, Cleo, samples In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. And I think when you sample well-trodden ground in songs that are, sampled often, I think you kind of have to demonstrate your artistic intent, show your work to justify it. And in the case of the Nina Simone sample, I mean, Kanye kind of left his mark with Blood on the Leaves, of course. So it's a risk to sample songs like that, but I think she delivers. And then from there, and the beats overall, again, really wholesome production. And Rapsody is so talented that she really can switch up her flows and the cadence of her raps, I think, pretty routinely. So I never really felt any of this got samey, which was great because it is a long listen. JID on Iman, that was great. Iman overall is a track I really liked as well. Yeah, I mean, I think there's very little fat on this, and that's exciting stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this right, but the single Ibtihaj, I thought was a really strong one with GZA and D'Angelo. She had some, Jizza. She had some really strong features on this. Which, I mean, Queen Latifah. When was the last time we saw Queen Latifah on a track?
Wow.
And I thought she was decent. Like it wasn't my favorite song, but still was fun to hear for sure. So I think Eve is definitely a success, and you should give it a listen. We're going to put a song or two onto our Nowstalgia Best of 2019 playlist on Spotify. Are we going to be putting any Brockhampton on there from the new album Ginger?
Well, there's one song I really enjoy off Ginger, and then other than that, there's just some songs that I think are solid. But yeah, not my favorite, unfortunately. What did you think of Brockhampton's 5th solo album, Ginger, or studio album?
Yeah. Well, so it was interesting, right? We talked about Iridescence last year. I caught up through the Saturation trilogy to be able to talk about Iridescence with some perspective. And I wasn't expecting them to be dropping this so quickly afterwards. I mean, Iridescence came out October? November?
September, yeah. So it's been 11 months.
But yeah, been a year or almost. And you know, the Saturation albums are, I don't want to say spastic, but I feel like they bring so much more energy in so many different ways. And Ginger was felt kind of one note. And I still think the production on this is really impressive and unique, and you don't really hear songs that are made like this. But I probably left this one feeling like this is my least favorite Brockhampton album of the 5, which is kind of disappointing because I felt like after Kevin Abstract's solo project, Arizona Baby, which I liked a lot, that this was going to be kind of like a great follow-up, and I felt a little disappointed.
Yeah, and the thing is, Kevin, especially in Saturation trilogy, really anchors those albums. His presence, his just kind of like the it of the group. And Ginger, he really stood out for not standing out, just kind of being one of the guys, and despite being the most talented guy in the group, I think it's kind of a perplexing choice. And listening to Ginger, I was like, oh, this is a little lighter than Iridescence. I mean, Iridescence was truly at their darkest time, obviously, when Amir leaving the group and the fallout from that. Yet, I think I just like more Iridescence songs. That's a darker, funkier album. And I think that's kind of the issue, is I like Brockhampton when they're happier, when they're more energetic and their chemistry shines through more. And this just feels like they kind of all are kind of processing the grief a little bit on their own. And it's kind of just more spread out and disjointed as a result. But No Halo, which was a song they had hyped up leading up to the album, that's my favorite song for sure off the project. That's just an interesting track because it's almost like a pop song, and they don't really have any songs like that to this point. I really like Merlin on that. And I think St. Percy, they have that really cool sample that they use to tease the album lead up. And I'm still not actually sure what that sample is. I haven't been able to track that down yet, but I like that. And the transition from St. Percy into If You Pray Right, which then is falling back on the bass line that they introduced in Heaven Belongs to You. That was great sequencing, great mixing. That sounded really great. But those songs, I think, they're solid songs, but I'm not going to run them back a lot. That's despite the fact that you're interpolating Nina Simone and sampling 3-6 Mafia,
Right. Yeah, I actually think the first 3 tracks, No Halo, Sugar, and Boy Bye, all are really good. And I actually feel like even up through Dearly Departed, which is probably my favorite track off this, mostly because of it creates this like ambiance almost with like the way that it has like that, like, I don't even know what it is, like synth or something like that, that kind of like is in the background the whole time, and then the electric guitars kind of create this like mood. This is probably the moodiest album I can remember for Brockhampton, and this is a boy band who kind of relies on being moody, but these guys are really in their feels, and Dearly Departed is like the center of that, where like these guitars I think are supposed to be like symbolizing this deep internal conflict that they're talking about, with like feeling like a mirror had really done them wrong. And I think, I forgot what his name was, Matt Champion. Yeah, Matt Champion on that track. He's talking about like the loss of his grandparents, things like that. So it's really about a song about grief. And then they go into Ginger, which is even more of like a feels vibey song, for lack of a better term. And then from there, Big Boy, Love Me for Life, and Victor Roberts just fell totally flat for me. And I was already kind of feeling like, this is a bit of a tough hang for Brockhampton. And I don't mind the Brockhampton songs where they get into their feels. I mean, San Andreas, or San
Marcos.
San Marcos, thank you, was what my favorite song off Iridescence. That's a totally like sad boy song. But this one just, I think it was because it was so one note, the whole album in general felt a bit like a slog.
Yeah. I think if any of the performers jumped out to me, it was just Joba. Again, he doesn't have a ton of spots, but the Big Boy and Love Me for Life, he just really has really come into his own in the last 2 albums as this really frenetic performer. And even when he's giving a dark, sad verse, it's just so compelling. I just think because he's really great on the mic. And it's kind of wild to think about because he's barely in the Saturation trilogy. He was not really one of the main performers at that time. But he really stood out to me. And I think Kevin just really floated in and out, which was just disappointing, obviously, because we were high on his solo project. Honestly, and again, I think a lot of the music videos are really cool. They're certainly creative dudes. They'll bounce back. But part of me just wonders if they're just kind of burnt out from this RCA record deal they signed just a year and a half ago, because they signed that deal for 6 albums over 3 years. As it was reported, they're already behind that pace, if that's is truly what they need to deliver on. But I just wonder if, and they said they recorded like 100 tracks for this and they narrowed it down. And I wonder if all 100 were sad, to be honest. Like what else did you guys have lay out there that we didn't hear?
Well, it's interesting. I was reading a little bit about this album, and I think they were kind of fucking with whoever was doing the interview, but they're like, we really want to make our summer album. We don't want this to be very upbeat. And then this comes out. But there's also stories about how a major influence on this album has been Shia LaBeouf holding these like group therapy sessions at their like creative home where they all get together and record.
Right.
Very interesting stuff. You mentioned Joba. One thing I was thinking with a band like this that I would really find interesting would be if they brought an outside producer, someone maybe like a Dev Hynes, to come in and maybe give a couple touches and flourishes on it. Because I mean, he makes sad boy music too, but I think he brings an element that maybe could be a little bit more interesting and maybe invigorate them a little bit. I love to throw out those hypothetical like producer artist like combinations. So that was my thought with that.
I mean, they all love Pharrell. It'd be cool if they actually could link up with him.
That would be a really cool.
And they have that Slow Thigh, that UK rapper. He pops up a few times in this, and Ryan Beatty, the singer who was on Queer and Bleach from past tracks, he pops up again. But yeah, they are signed to RCA. They can bring some people in. It doesn't just need to be Ramil and Jabari the whole time.
Yeah. Although, like you said,
Nice
Ramil and Jabari were still great.
Oh yeah, no, they're awesome. I mean,
Mhm.
they're super exciting, and I know Ramil actually has been branched out a little bit. Remember, he popped up on the Kaliukis record last year.
Mhm.
So,
I mean,
yeah,
isn't that kind of the thing though? Is that they're just kind of getting too big to remain a group this big? Like their perspectives are so varied. How do you create any cohesion with that?
that's the thing too. They don't even live together anymore. Actually, now they all come together at that creative house. They used to all be living in the same house and working that way. That's probably how they the crap out saturation so fast because they're all on top of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again because maybe the group just they need to straighten the arrow again, and maybe once they progress past the lows they've been at in the past year and a half, they can get to that point and just come easier. But right now, I think Ginger, like Iridescence, is just too kind of singular focus on each member's perspective on the grief. It doesn't always come together. And like I said with Iridescence, Bareface, he's very hit or miss for me. I think some of those songs, man, he's just kind of wailing. It really loses me.
We're definitely going to add at least one Brockhampton track. Taylor Swift, though, we were not excited for the 7th studio album, the first one she owns, Lover, because pretty much every single up to this point we've been pretty down on.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and then I listened to it. I was like, oh, this is actually a really good Taylor Swift album. And I'm really excited to talk about it because I think it's very interesting to talk about this album in terms of her strategy in putting it out, but then also to just talk about how this propels Taylor forward in her career. Reputation, we talked about it last year and we were pretty down on it.
2017. But yeah, I mean,
years ago.
We panned that shit because it deserved that. And frankly, you can look at the charts. No one ran back those songs after the initial push. It did not make the impact that you expect from an album that's 3 times platinum.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Taylor Swift is long past the point of needing that. She still sells out international arena tours, and she traditionally sells her albums no matter how good or bad they are. So Taylor Swift is too big to fail in that sense. But Reputation is without a doubt the biggest disappointment she's had creatively. And as you said, the singles for Lover, man, me sucks. Why was that the first track? I mean, Me is the worst track on Lover, an hour-long album. Yeah, and it's the lead single. It just doesn't make any sense.
And then the second single, You Need to Calm Down, it's right up there. I mean, it's
queer baiting accusations too, taking advantage of Pride Month, another bad look for Taylor for sure.
And then Lover was the third single, which dropped only a week before the album.
The Archer, then Lover.
Yeah, so the Archer actually I like. And I think in context of the album, it comes across a lot better. But yeah, it's interesting that she chose those songs, and maybe it's because she felt like those would be the ones that were most poppy and radio friendly. Because I do think, I mean, I think a lot of these songs are certainly pop and can be played on the radio, but something like Cornelia Street, which is probably my favorite song from this album, I don't know if that fits that like earworm algorithm the same way something like Me does, just because of the like hoo hoo hoo, like that sort of thing is what gets caught in your head and they just play that over and over. But Cornelia Street is actually like a thoughtful song that harkens back to who Taylor Swift was when she wrote Fearless or Speak Now. It just feels it has so much more depth than the singles in a lot of ways.
Right, and if you wanted something pop and radio friendly, why not? Of course. Why didn't you go with I Think He Knows?
Yeah,
that's a bop. That song is great, and frankly, when I first listened to this, when the beat first comes in for the first introduction of the chorus, I get this weird Sam Hunt Body Like a Backrobe production vibe just for a split second. I'm still trying to place it, but that's what it brought me to. Yeah, I think that song's a banger. You could have gone with that. You could have gone Paper Rings. I think there's some obvious radio friendly songs. And yeah, and those are not the most lyrical choices on this album.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a better introduction to introduce to radio, and I'm sure those are forthcoming singles. She's already released 4, and the album just came out. But yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. Just it's a return to form in the songwriting sense for Taylor. So I think that was severely lacking on Reputation, because she's finally gotten over, or at least progressed past, the whole feud with Kanye and Kim, and then the subsequent public fallout with that. And she's less about victimizing herself and kind of getting back to what Taylor Swift is good for and why she's so famous and popular, where she's able to articulate her emotions and her feelings in a compelling way that's really accessible to mass audience, but also really speaks to people.
Yeah.
And, well, I think there's still misses on here, and there's certainly still bloat on this album. It's like Red, and Red's just a album with banger after banger, but also has album cuts that people will cry to and sing every word to when she performs them. So yeah, it's quite the comeback, just because, and again, critical comeback, not commercial comeback. But I mean, a few months ago, people were talking about, especially once Me came out, like, is Taylor Swift done? Old Town Road stopped Me and You Need to Come Down from getting #1, and Billie Eilish is the new sound of pop. Can Taylor Swift and Katy Perry keep up? And Taylor Swift got back to the basics on this, and it worked.
Interesting you brought up Red, because this feels very much like a continuation or partner in terms of her albums with Red, especially because when she dropped the album, she wrote a line like, I used to think love was red, but it's actually like golden, like the daylight or something like that. I think kind of mentioning a song from her tracks. You also mentioned the way that when is Taylor Swift at her best? And in reading a review by Anna Gaka on Pitchfork about it, I thought she made a really, really good point about her songwriting. And that's that Swift seems to be at her most on her A game when she is exploring her feelings and trying to explain them rather than trying to teach us something. Like something like Me, where she's trying to like tell everybody like, hey, like there's only one of you, like don't let people get you down. That's when we find her very grating. I think that was the thing about Reputation a lot of the time, was it felt like a lot like she was saying, I've been through these things and this is like how you deal with it, or what's
I did something bad.
Right. But then you look at the songs on here that are probably the best. I already mentioned Cornelia Street, a song like Soon You'll Get Better, which, even though that's not maybe an upbeat song that will get a ton of radio play, is a really moving and emotive song. And you bring in the fucking Dixie Chicks to sing background for you, and it sounds amazing. Yeah, it's when she is exploring what's going on for her or things that have happened to her, I do think Swift does a better job. Taylor does a better job of making songs people want to hear and that don't grate on you so much. It's funny because I think we've mentioned, this was 16, 18 tracks, something like that.
Yep.
18 tracks. I think we've mentioned like half of them as songs that we've liked in some way.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the opener?
I think that's a good opener. It's a good intro. I forgot that you existed. Again, that just, you hear that for the first time and immediately brings you back to, again, that textbook Taylor, where I think she kind of has acknowledged, a lot of reviews are pointing this out, she's acknowledged, perhaps to herself, or at least publicly now, that confrontation does fuel her lyrical content. Usually it was relationship and breakup focused, then it became public shaming, Reputation. Now we're back to before. And I mean, that's just going to be like an anthem to tons of people, men and women. I think Cruel Summer right after that, really, he's like, oh wait, wow, this, like, here's an earwormy song. Here's a song with radio potential right away, and you just immediately lose that distaste that you might have had from those singles. The bridge in Cruel Summer leading up to like the crescendo at the end is like, that's some of the best Taylor Swift like songwriting and like music construction. And shout out to Jack Antonoff, who was
producing a lot of this, and
He's all over this.
I think he adds a lot. It seems like Frank Dukes also was all over this album in production. I wanted to get your feelings on two more songs. The Man. How did you feel about Taylor's takedown of misogyny?
Yeah, so listening to it, I couldn't help but feel like this was like trying to put a bow specifically on the Kanye stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And in that lens, I think it really fails and it just doesn't hold water. And we don't have to get into that, but it does come across as a bit half-baked.
Yeah.
Where she's not really exploring anything beyond saying, well, if I was a man, this, and this. As if, and it just feels like she's trying to absolve herself of all past mistakes because she is right. She wouldn't have been as criticized if she was a man for certain things. But that does not mean she didn't make mistakes. I just feel like she's not, it's like putting your head in the sand for a second. And if you had fine-tuned this message, it probably could have actually been like a much more profound song, but I just don't think it gets there.
Yeah, it could have used a little bit more reflection, I think. Better song about being a man. If I Were a Boy or The Man.
No comment.
London Boy. You know, this is probably the most out there song that is identifying the inspiration for this album, which seems to be Joe Alwyn. Who, you know, last time we saw him, Emma Stone was emotionally dominating him throughout The Favorite.
He plays dicks in movies. He's played a Nazi in Operation Finale. He rapes Lucas Hedges in Boy Erased. He hasn't stood out in a movie yet, for good reason. Yeah.
How'd you feel about London Boy?
I actually think it's kind of funny. Like the whole, she loves the West End the way she loves New York City. Okay, cool. Watching rugby with the boys, if you say so. If that's really how it went down, fine. I get it's just kind of like a cheery, inoffensive song, which is, again, if that's kind of your album fluff, that's fine because it's better than the past fluff.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fun. It's poppy. It's just gonna be what it's gonna be. I do like that. That's like the, you know, I saw The Ringer talked about this a little bit, how the guys that the albums are about oftentimes will mark the Taylor Swift album, so to speak. And I had no idea that Taylor Swift was with Joe Alwyn or that they were dating or whatever. Unlike, you know, like Jake Gyllenhaal or John Mayer or Harry Styles, who have been mentioned in these other songs. This one feels like the least like placing. Like in a couple of years, I'll probably totally forget who it was about. So not too concerned about it. So where do you see Swift at now? She back?
Certainly back. Important to notice here, she did not collaborate with Max Martin at all on this. As you said, this was all Jack Antonoff, who's been very in vogue. And we've talked about his work before with Lorde and other people. Also noteworthy is that Louis Bell is all over this. Louis Bell, one of the newest super producers we have, really caught on once he started working on Post Malone a few years ago. You think he won Producer of the Year from like a Billboard Award or something, whatever it was. But he's actually interesting because he's from Quincy, Mass. He came up making songs for Mike Stud. Then he got introduced to Post Malone, and now he's like the most mainstream producer ever, makes hits for everyone. It's kind of a crazy come up. But working with someone like Louis Bell, and you know, again, did she work with Greg Kurstin on Reputation? I don't remember, but I can't recall. She's using the people that are making stuff that's actually like of the moment, which I think is smart. And Max Martin is certainly still of the moment. I mean, he's all over Thank You Next, for example. But it just seems like Taylor's got her own head right again, and now she can just take advantage of the commercial force that she still is. You know, do I believe that she genuinely decided to finally bash the politicians she dislikes? No, I think she realized that was actually good for her brand. That's what she did. I would never say she's not calculated, but when she's managing her career the right way, like she is right now, or at least how we expect it to go from this album, she's the biggest face in pop. I mean, in one day, she had the biggest sales week of the year, being the Jonas Brothers. It's going to go 775 to 850,000 total units first week is the projection. Of that, 650 to 700,000 are pure sales. So one of the few people in pop music too, that really can motivate her fans, her legion of fans, to buy a physical record or an iTunes download, spend that $10. And as you know, she still saw her upcoming tour. So yeah, Taylor Swift's back, and I'm just interested to see if she can keep it going or if she has too much pride and messes up again. Because again, like the man could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
So right now she's in a good spot.
Well, she's gonna test that, or supposedly is gonna test that, because she says she's gonna re-record all of her past albums. We'll see. If she does that, I think that'll be a very interesting move. It'll be interesting to see if she puts new flourishes on any of those songs. So, where does this fall for you in terms of Swift albums?
2 or 3, 2 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think Red is my favorite just because it's the most poppy, and that's why I like Taylor. I don't really run back the deep cuts from Taylor Swift. Shocker. I think 1989, which has my favorite Taylor Swift song, Blank Space, but I think overall has a lot of misses on the album.
Mm-hmm.
I think Red is probably safer. I think I had this too after Red. Not really a big Speak Now guy, and I don't care about Fearless or Self-Titled. So yeah, I think I have this too.
Yeah, I think when I'm looking here, I think I probably have this top 3. I don't know the exact order, but it's Red, this, and yeah, Fearless and 1989 can jump in there. I really like 1989, especially the singles on it. Even something like Out of the Woods, which I think it's panned, I really enjoy. So to each their own, but she has a really strong track depth, in terms of the singles. It's kind of crazy. So
about to turn 30 too. She's just getting started.
We'll be talking about her a lot moving forward. Hopefully we'll be talking a lot of Mindhunter moving forward too, because season 2 just dropped on Netflix, and 2 weeks ago now. And Mindhunter season 2, it felt a lot like other very popular shows, something like Mr. Robot or The Wire, where season 2 maybe wasn't as strong as season 1, but it felt like it was laying a lot of groundwork to expand the show moving forward, in my opinion. How did you feel about Mindhunter season 2?
Yeah, so I've been catching up on the show recently, so season 1's still very fresh in my mind. And what obviously stands out, as you kind of alluded to, is that season 2 is just much more of a crime procedural, especially in the back half, once we really get into and focused on the Atlanta child murders. That's kind of the sole focus of Holden and Tench. And as for the future, I think there's a lot of options now, whereas season 1 is a much more atmospheric, moody, cerebral show, very much influenced by Fincher. And Fincher's influence both stylistically and thematically still present in the season. He directs the beginning of the season. But I'm actually really curious, and I'm not really even sure where to go with it, but where the show chooses to actually go from here, assuming it does get renewed, just because they've been teasing the BTK killer through both seasons with really effective cold open scenes for the most part in Kansas. And that's despite the fact that he doesn't get caught for 25 more years.
Yeah. So,
and this show has mostly been trying to play with the facts. Obviously, Holden and Tench are composite characters based off this Douglas book, but this is an artistic license. But they've been sticking pretty closely to the real, the serial killers and whatnot. So, are we going to age up and leave the period setting?
Yeah.
It seems like that's way down the line still. So I'm not really sure what happens next.
There has to be a time jump coming. I don't know if it's going to be season 3, only because even as this is going on, they're still introducing the idea of serial killers, the idea of these multiple.
You're calling it now?
Yeah, right. So there's, I think the season 3 you might start to see that becoming more established, more mainstream. This idea, um, uh, but I think what I feel excited for, and you talked about all these different directions the show can go, is the first season was very focused on Jonathan Groff's Holton Ford,
Yep.
who is a very compelling character throughout the whole first season, seeing the rise and the creation of this unit, especially him teaming up with Holt McCallany's Tench was really, really fun to watch. And they pulled Anna Torv's Wendy car in there, and it really started to hit the ground running. You got Kemper and the guy who plays him, Cameron Britton, who's
Yeah.
Just mesmerizing every time he's on screen.
Guest actor Emmy nomination. Fantastic.
Yeah, he's great. So there was all these elements, but it was really like, this is Ford's story. This now it feels a little bit more like the team story. Wendy gets a lot of time about her personal life and exploring who she is and her identity as a lesbian woman in this time when it's not really accepted to be out. You have tension, all of the family drama going on with his son and his wife Nancy, and they really started to build these characters out, and even Greg a little bit in the interrogation scenes. You start to learn a little bit more about him and who he is as a character, and I imagine probably season 3 will explore that a little bit more. And by just the amount of sheer time that they could give, I mean, the only time you see Holton outside of the job, he's still working. He's being brought in to find out about these Atlanta child murders and then push that to the forefront of the FBI's consciousness, right, to kind of push his agenda forward. So other than some of the anxiety stuff with him, you don't really get much character growth with him. And I feel like they really wanted to build up these other characters to try to make the show a little bit more well-rounded, I guess. But I think because of that, the show didn't have the highs that the first season had. There was no moment like at the end of the first season, like with the Led Zeppelin song drop and Kemper and Ford having that showdown. But still, the interrogation scenes were really fascinating. You get the Manson moment, which I thought was really, really well done. And it kind of, I think, made you feel what a lot of the Manson family talked about, feeling like he had this control over you, especially with, you see the Tench totally turned off to the guy, but Ford is totally bought in at a point. And then you also have the interrogation scene where I forgot the name of the killer, but where Wendy shares the story about her mentor and who's lesbian and kind of throws that guy off. And that guy was also really mesmerizing. Even Son of Sam was David Berkowitz was a really fascinating. I think that's where the show excelled the most, was when they were actually face to face with these serial killers, how they were interacting.
Right. Did you recognize who plays Henley? The guy who assisted the Candyman guy?
I
recognize him?
I know I'd seen him. I couldn't place it though.
He's the guy who plays young Ned Stark in the flashbacks, the Tower of Joy.
Yes.
No, now it ends. That guy.
Good
actually,
catch.
I recognized who played Berkowitz despite the makeup, because I heard his voice. It's one of the kids from Project X, the party movie from 2012.
Oh,
the guy who is Costa. I fucking saw it and I looked it up.
Wow.
I was really proud of myself.
That's a really good catch as well.
Yeah, I think what you hit on a lot there, and as you said, Holden, his kind of growing obsession with the ethos of killers and the psychology they're developing, his unit, and his growing fascination, genuine fascination with it throughout season 1 is really present. And then obviously you said the mental breakdown happens, and then he breaks up with Debbie, and that was a bit of a thin relationship in season 1, but I think it is effective for showing just how Ford kind of devolved, and he's so obsessed with his work. And that's why in season 1 there isn't anything else going on with Holden, because he's just so singular focused. And then when we have his team struggling with their personal lives, you see the show kind of showing the other side of its coin, where the serial killers are fantastic at compartmentalizing the evil, heinous shit they do, and then it's people studying them and talking to them that are having trouble with their own personal lives and bringing their work home and stuff like that. And ultimately, that's what's always been so great about the show is it never shows the violence or any of the acts, despite the fact that it's really good at maintaining the dramatic tension, making you think like something might be coming. But there's no chase. There's no Hannibal Lecter shit, right? Mm-hmm. It's very, very methodical, very grounded because it's all about the psychology. Yep. And that's really hard to pull off. And I think one of the best scenes, one of the Fincher scenes, is when they're talking, when Tench and the local cop are talking to Kevin, one of the survivor from the BTK, and the way they frame that and build that up, and you think something bad's going to happen, but no, it's just a tense conversation the whole time. But they never show you that face, and they make you think you're going to see that face. That whole sequence is masterful.
Yeah.
And as you said, overall, just the serial killer scenes, when you build up to these interrogations, these conversations, is very, I think, showman-like. And Kemper, of course, stood out so much in season 1. That's probably why he came back this time around. I mean, he really was at the same prison as Manson, but it was just kind of cool to see Cameron Britton again, just because, man, I think the Kemper character is so fascinating both in the show and I think honestly in real life. Like you can read the YouTube comments under like the real interviews they have of him on, and it's like everyone's like, man, what a waste of a 140 IQ. This guy is really bright. Too bad he's a fucking psychopath who's paranoid schizophrenic and all that. But yeah, I think the show is really great, and even I think I would agree. I think season 1's a bit stronger. Just I think overall the mood is more effective at like maintaining that atmosphere the show wants you to be in. And also I really like the rhythm we had in the early part of season 1 where tension holding us on the road, talking to those cops and kind of really learning and developing that psychology. But overall, and the characters, I like where all the characters are at the end of this season, even if Antorv's kind of sidelined by the finale. But yeah, there's a lot of potential for the future. So I really hope Netflix does in fact renew it, because they haven't been a fan of season 3 renewals as of late, and we know Mindhunter's not the cheapest show. So we hope the Fincher influence can keep this going.
I think this is a show that will definitely get picked up. Glow, I'm not so sure about, but this one I feel very confident in, mostly because you do have Fincher behind it, but I don't know. I guess I just can't foresee this show not coming back is where I'm at with it.
Right.
And Groff is a rising star, I feel like.
Oh, for sure. Part of me wonders if they had to change the scripts because Groff couldn't be on set as much.
Yeah.
You know, he's in the show slightly less this time. But yeah, he's superb. And you kind of wonder how far they're going to take the Holden arc, you know? Is he going to truly devolve and into some obsessive guy who loses the plot as he has in spurts so far? That's probably more likely to me. I mean, obviously they tease that Tench's kid is a serial killer in the making. And we probably won't progress far enough to see that. Then again, if we time jump to BTK and Tench's kid's actually killing people too, who knows? But yeah, man, Groff's great. The whole cast is great.
Yeah, it's a really, really great show. Can't speak highly enough about it. So catch up if you haven't been tuned into it at all. That does it for our reviews this week. What do we got next week, Dave?
Yeah, so next week, Tool and Lana Del Rey are dropping records. We'll talk about those 2 weeks from now. But Dave Chappelle has a special out that we'll talk about. That's coming out this week, probably right now, if you're listening to this. I'm trying to see the Peanut Butter Falcon, the Shia LaBeouf movie that everyone loves right now. Talking about that. Some other stuff's come up, like Boycott Mulan and The Hunt getting pulled from distribution. So we'll pack the show per usual. So yeah,
so
keep an eye
out. So like I said, that does it for us this week. Hit us up at Nowstalgia Pod on Twitter. go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to find all the ways to listen to the podcast. And lastly, give us a 5-star rating or review on iTunes and subscribe on YouTube. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Peace out.